Technology is changing the way we build, buy, and use real estate around the world. But how do you find the right partner or solution and bring together the worlds of tech, real estate, and investment? To stay ahead, you need someone who can help translate ideas into action, problems into solutions, investment into returns. The PropTech Connection are the experts in PropTech. We understand the market. We know the leading techs, trends, and players around the world. Through our unique data, methodology, and technology, we have mapped out the ecosystem. This innovative approach to assessment cuts out the noise and speeds up adoption. The PropTech Connection gives you access to more than 90 countries. With a network of over 15,000 PropTechs, we source PropTech for more than $4 trillion of real estate assets and $9 billion of venture capital funds. Our unique perspective makes the real difference. It's time for the PTC to help you source, execute, grow. The PropTech Connection, the bridge between real estate and technology.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Realcomm Live. We've got a great show for you today, but before we get started, just want to remind you that Realcomm's coming up in a couple of weeks, a little bit over 2 weeks, and we are busy behind the scenes getting sets built, the studio built, the guest scheduled, the content organized. We are going to bring you the best topics, the hot topics, if you will, of the industry from our stage at Realcomm. So Realcomm Live is going to go off the virtual component and get into the studio in a little bit over 2 weeks. So hopefully you're going to be joining us for that. So what we do the last month or so for Realcomm Live before the conference is pick the big topics. We want to start talking about them early so we hit the ground running when we get there. And this week is no different. The topic, PropTech investments. This has been going on since 2009 after the crash. What we call the third or the fourth phase of PropTech. And the money that's been coming into this market for the last 13 years is nothing short of extraordinary. I have been a critic on how much money and the lack of governance and the lack of focus. There's nobody more interested in PropTech innovation and young startup companies than I am. But I have been a little critical on what's been going on. And I think we're actually starting to see some cracks in the ice. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit today, but we're not just on that, but also the great opportunities and the great companies that are out there. And we've got two phenomenal guests, Ivo van Breukelen from PropTech Connection. He's out of Chicago, and Stephen MacDonald, PropTech Connection out of Australia. And just want to note, Stephen is up at 3 o'clock in the morning his time. And I want to say thank you. So why don't we bring these guys in and let's talk about what the heck is going on in PropTech investment. Hi, guys. How are you?
Thank you, Jim, for having us.
Hi, Jim.
And Stephen, I want to say thank you again. 3 o'clock in the morning, I've done that. You set the alarm, or sometimes you never go to bed, and it's a little crazy when you're trying to do international, and the clock goes 24 hours a day.
Indeed, no problem, and thank you for the opportunity.
So, boy, what a big topic. Okay, I mean, billions of dollars. Okay, and I refer to the fourth phase of PropTech. After the after the financial crash in 2008, the money just starts pouring in. From my vantage point, and actually, Ian, if you could bring it up, that might be a good time to just set some groundwork. So what we're looking at here, we presented this graphic on a large LED wall at our conference in Nashville in 2019. And at the time, there was 3,000 PropTech companies, and those are each one of their logos. And I think we actually copied and pasted some of these just to show the impact. But at the time, we were saying 3,000. Today, I think we're talking, I've heard numbers of 6, 7, and 8,000 globally. So when you look at these number of companies, it's astounding that there could be this many new companies dealing with an industry that historically has been pretty stubborn in rapid adoption, right? And so what I would like to do, today is talk about, a little bit of that history. But given that you guys are so focused on this globally, we are going to get into some of the nitty gritty. So why don't we start with each of you taking 30 seconds, just give the audience a little bit of your background so they know from where you came as it relates to this topic.
Sure. I'll maybe kick off. I was actually investing in clean tech for a major VC fund about 30 years ago. And it's quite interesting when you start to see some of the concepts now. We were still looking at them then, and it was more around that energy independence piece. So I'd come from that clean tech VC fund world where I'm from in Scotland, moved to Australia, worked within a major REIT in real estate, looking at cap trans, supporting the team there and looking at how it impacts financials, and then headed up the data analytics function for a major REIT, and then headed up the investment team for the largest PropTech VC fund here in Australia.
So you actually started from the clean tech perspective, which is, has a great relationship with PropTech. That's where you got your start.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Ivo?
Yeah, so about myself, I'm actually originally from the Netherlands, so from Amsterdam, background in international business and finance, and then worked in different geographies. So moved to Asia, lived a number of years in South America, and then made my way out through the US. Did some consulting work for a small boutique investment bank, and then set up the PropTech connection. And what I do in the business is basically lead our global origination network efforts. So basically responsible for that entire network piece where we have a very strong global presence, sitting basically in the middle of the three different actors, right? So the investors, the buyers, and the PropTechs.
So in the investment community, you've got angels, you got venture, you got family offices, you got all sorts of different buckets of capital. So what made the two of you decide on PropTech? What attracted you to this intersection of real estate and technology?
I think maybe I'll kick off this one. I think it's a natural fit given our experience and what we do. And one of the key things that we saw, obviously having that experience both in real estate and construction and the lack of tech adoption, in conjunction with that obviously the large amount of capital pouring into the ecosystem is a recipe for great success, I would say. And the one thing that we saw in the market is that it's a very siloed and inefficient market. And we thought and felt that it had to be global. So that's actually the main driver why we started it. But I think given that understanding, that deep knowledge in investments, as well as in real estate, and also understanding the tech side, I think is really, really relevant to get things done.
Stephen, how about you?
Yes, as Eva said, it was a function of our backgrounds, and we've taken a very structured approach to how we look at it. I think people are struggling to adopt or even to invest as you see more general funds come in. And I think to your point, Jim, it's a function of there's so many companies out there. And what we sat down and said is we can actually support every one of those actors in actually meeting the right people. So it's not just a race to marketing, and then if the big funds get inundated with propositions, but there's a level of tier two in terms of marketing or awareness that have equally deep pockets, and they're looking to invest. And a lot of PropTechs don't know about it. On the real estate side, it's very difficult to unpack which is the most relevant one for them. And we'll come on to it, but in our view, it's very bespoke to your asset, never mind your portfolio. So then you actually have to navigate this really awkward system to find a company that suits your strategic need.
Now, in the course of putting on our events and all of the media we produce and everything, I talk to a lot of startups, and that proverbial, young kid, good idea, gets $5 million. And I'll be on the phone with them and they're all excited, and I'm excited for them. I mean, I started a real estate PropTech company in 1999, right? One of the first enterprise-based solutions for the real estate industry on the internet, using the internet as the background or backdrop, I should say. So after talking to them for 15 minutes, I start to realize that they're not talking about a company. They're talking about an automation sequence inside of a module that's inside of an application, which is part of an enterprise. Okay. So, I mean, many companies, big companies, established companies actually have the exact identical functionality inside a very small part of their big enterprise. This person had no idea it existed. Okay. Didn't do any due diligence on competitive market. Why does the market give money to people with unproven idea. I mean, obviously unproven ideas, they're all unproven, but ideas that haven't been properly vetted and really haven't done the deep dive. And as we were talking earlier, it appears that there's a lot of folks who just aren't doing their homework before they place the capital or they make the investments. Would you agree or disagree?
I think not doing their homework is strong. I think there's potentially an erroneous assumption around the scalability of some techs. And I think if you look at fintech or B2C, it's much easier to scale that. And then once you can prove a bit of traction, you can then extrapolate that, and that's your valuation, and that's worth the money. Real estate is much more nuanced, and you need to realize that and then understand that it's going to take a lot longer. So I don't think it's necessarily homework.
Brilliant point. Let's pause. Let's unpack that. In the financial investment algorithm, adoption rate has typically been seriously miscalculated. Is that what you just said?
I never said seriously. What I was saying is it's very hard to calculate, and if you apply the same hurdles or benchmarks that you would on other types of tech, that's where you can start to see problems. And it's a function of a number of things. If you look at even Asia, we've split it into three in terms of where they are, in terms of their economies, potentially their tech adoption, and their real estate sophistication. I mean, India only had REITs 3-4 years ago, and the potential is huge. So yes, you may have a solution that works well in the US or Western Europe, but that doesn't mean it's going to necessarily be attractive to somebody in India, Indonesia, South America. Whereas something like a Spotify or an app that people use, that can be used in Brazil equally as it can be used in Czechoslovakia or somewhere. And I think
let me pivot. Why do you think people make or tie fintech and PropTech together so quickly? Right? They're both kind of in the financial markets, but to Stephen's point, it's the real estate industry is much more separate, much more categorized, much more bifurcated and nuanced. Why do people assume if I make these assumptions and logical conclusions in fintech, I can automatically apply them to PropTech?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, what we're seeing in the market and where there's a lot of interest from investors in terms of deploying capital is that payment layer in PropTech. So that intersection on PropTech and fintech, I think, is very, very hot. And to some of the things that Stephen mentioned, and also you, I think we often see that on the PropTech side, folks think that geographical proximity is a reason for success, and we don't think that's necessarily the case. So to your point, Jim, that you asked earlier about deploying capital, we think it's also a lot about visibility, right? So being able to bring the right opportunities to the right investors is I think, very, very important. And what we started to see is obviously that it was very regional biased, right? So country per country, and where we really believe it needs to be that the global play.
Well, I was on a phone with a venture capitalist, and we were talking about the market, and he said, I won't even consider any companies unless they bring me a deck that's going to clearly define how they're going to disintermediate, I won't name the name, but one of the major enterprise players in our industry. And all I kept thinking was, they don't understand how long it would take to rip that solution out of a real estate company. The thought, the data, the migration, the conversions, that even if this person had, the cure to cancer, so to speak, even if it was the best thing that we've seen in years, you just could not make that decision overnight. Right. And so to come out and say, I'm going to disintermediate the major enterprise player, to me was somewhat naive. Right. And we've had millions of those conversations. And I just wonder, what kind of due diligence is going behind the deployment of this capital. I want to get to a couple more questions before we take a break. Quickly, if one of you could explain what it is you guys do, what makes you different in the PropTech sector?
I'll maybe just quickly just do this one. We support, and as I say, we've structured it from a real estate conceptual view. So whether it's housing affordability, whether it's space utilization, whether it's customer experience, and then we've actually back-solved a suite of technologies from our network of 15,000 PropTechs that meet that use case. And then from a strategic point of view, if you're a real estate company, we support you and recommend a suite of technologies and then the best performing PropTechs that meet your criteria. From an investment lens, we give you access to global deal flow, very expensive for origination. As Ivo said, there is a regional bias given that cost. And then the PropTechs, it's obviously, we then give insights into potential customers should they want to go from APAC to the US, but also capital that meets their requirements.
So you wedge yourself right in between the supply and the demand side.
100%.
Yeah, independent, neutral,
Yeah,
unbiased as humanly possible advice.
Absolutely.
that's accurate.
Critically needed. All right, I'm not going to get to my next question before the break, but I want you to think about this while we take a brief commercial. Last 60 days, lots of news articles, what seems to be some cracks in the ice. And I want to talk about, is this an anomaly? Was this just a post-pandemic hiccup? Or are we starting to see some real signs that the whole prop tech investment landscape may be changing right before our eyes? So let's take a brief break and we'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Rao Mulpuri, and along with my colleagues, over the last 12 years, we've been building View to transform the day-to-day window. The smart window controls heat and glare, eliminates blinds and shades, and provides view and natural light all the time. Because we have a highly connected system, we're able to bring a whole host of smart building applications. For example, this video you're watching is coming to you through the View Smart Display, which is a high-definition display that's installed right into the window. Also on this platform, we have a sensor array that has a number of environmental sensors, and these can be used in order to control the environment precisely for the health and wellness of the people. These new applications transform buildings into living spaces that help us engage, interact, and communicate with each other. The buildings will be transformed into high-speed 5G cell towers with complete wireless coverage. Now that the blinds are lifted, these humanized spaces will keep us entertained while keeping us connected to natural light and views of the outdoors. And we're just getting started.
All right. So, we're talking about the adoption timeframe. Okay. Just a note on what View's doing, and they're doing phenomenal work. They're going to be at our conference in a big way. I first saw that concept in Seoul, South Korea in 2004. Okay. So, think about that. And he said, we're just getting started. Actually, that concept, that theme has been started for almost 20 years now. So I think everybody needs to really look at that adoption timeframe part of the algorithm and realize that even if it is the best thing since sliced bread, 18, 24 month, changing of the world is not realistic. And a slow, crawl, walk, run is still the way a lot of these businesses start and ultimately end up. So, all right. So going back to the question before the break, what are you seeing in the articles? What are you hearing? Are you hearing the same thing that's floating around my inbox in the last 60 to 90 days?
I think what we're seeing in the market, obviously there is quite some pressure on the equity markets. And what we see on the investor side, I think is a couple of things to point out. One is that there's caution in the market. So you see already some of the valuations are dropping, which in itself obviously creates a lot of opportunities, meaning that some private equity funds are probably looking for some consolidation opportunities. There are a lot of companies in the market. We do believe that there is a lot of capital still coming into the market, but obviously there's more caution, meaning that probably allocating that capital is going to be more, how should I say, more delicate than it may have been before.
So, Stephen, when we were in the green room, you had mentioned, we don't want to mention names, but a major, Silicon Valley investment fund that is making statements that, within 30 days, the big layoffs are coming. Can you elaborate without naming names, but give us some, context on what that analysis and those statements were all about?
I think just tech in general, I think there's been an overriding assumption that just to spend and you'll raise at the next round, and it's all about that global catcher. And I think there's now definitely a return to fundamentals, and the funding point was kind of alluding to that fact. I think it was quite an extensive presentation, and it was kind of be game ready for a rapidly shifting environment, both funding and macro, I think.
And when you say rapid, I remember the day in 1990. I mean, it literally, it's like it's a mind shift happens like literally within a 24-hour period. 1990 real estate crash, 2001 .com, and 2008 financial. Maybe it wasn't a day, maybe it was a week or a month, but it's like a lot of confusion. Then there's quiet, and something's going on, and then it makes the change, right? And so the way I would look at this is a lot of craziness has been going on for a long time. This will be painful, there's no doubt, but I think it's healthy. And I think in my career, the best innovation has always occurred after this hype phase, the recalibration, the collapse, if you will, the tightening. And then when that bottoms, that's when the real innovation picks up. I mean, think about in 2001, we had two great companies, when that market crashed and our exhibit floor went from 200 to 100, two little companies that survived were CoStar and LoopNet, okay? Because they were good, strong companies, fundamentals, good management team. Well, CoStar ends up buying LoopNet, and now CoStar is $1 billion company, right? Multi-billion dollar. So it's painful, but it's necessary, and actually a lot of good comes when we get through it. So, all right, let's turn to the positive because, like I said, the world's not stopping. These cycles are normal throughout history. When we come out, assuming that this is a tightening and PropTech is going to come back stronger than ever, what ideas, concepts, areas do you like? Smart buildings, indoor air quality, ESG. I mean, what is it that you see a lot of the money going to be going to in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, maybe a couple of things to highlight, and thanks for the question, Jim. I think one of the key things that we are actually looking at quite a bit is the emerging markets. What you start to see there is that the concept of PropTech is still pretty new, but the scale of the opportunity is obviously massive. Understanding that in Africa, for example, you have to pay rent 12 months upfront with a very heavy commission structure. So in some of those markets like Brazil, Vietnam, India, we are looking very, very closely. We think there are massive opportunities materializing fairly soon. So that's more on a regional bias with the right capital partners, the right management team, and executing on that strategy. We think there's a great opportunity. And then maybe on the thematic side, where we see most interest from an investor standpoint, I would say is threefold. Number one is around construction tech. Sales cycles tend to be a little bit more compressed, so the path to cash is much more compelling. So we see a lot of activity there. We see a lot of corporate venture arms coming in that arena. And the second thematic is around data. So you see basically that model of capturing data as early as possible in the cycle. And the third one, obviously, that's always on the forefront of the news and the media is ESG. But we see a shift both from institutional folks as well as on the real estate company side, where it's not more about talking, but actually a lot of folks are talking about implementation. So we think there's a lot of capital coming into the market there.
And before we go to Stephen on that same question, I would beg to differ with you a little bit. You said PropTech's a fairly new phenomena. There's an illustration, a graphic on our website under the About tab that shows the history of PropTech. We believe we're in the 5th phase right now, and we also believe that this PropTech revolution started in about the 1950s, okay, with companies like Johnson, Honeywell, Siemens, right? And then programs like, accounting, IWMS, and then, phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5 is next generation AI machine. But I think we need to agree that, or at least have a good discussion, debate on, is PropTech new or is it just been an evolution that continues to improve, but has actually been around a while?
Yeah, so I was more pointing out to the fact that it's on that regional play, right? So in certain countries, obviously there's PropTech, but it's not as advanced as obviously what it is in Europe or the US. And what we start to see in some of those markets, that some of the proven winners models are actually copycats of
Interesting enough, though, I mean, I've spent some time looking at China, and they're going for it. Now, I mean, you look at the Huawei strategy and the smart building district city strategy. That's a whole episode. In fact, that's a month's worth of episodes, which we will start dealing with after the conference, starting to look at globally who really is leading the race in PropTech implementation and such. Stephen, what do you see?
Similar to what Ivo said, I still think a lot of companies, particularly in commercial sector is still fixing its data. It's still that data play to actually structure that data to give actual insights, whether that be project like transaction based or leasing. And then on the construction side, as Ivo said as well, to your point, Jimmy, about disrupting incumbents, that sector construction has had very little tech, and actually the marginal impact of that's much greater. So you're starting to see automation or visualization of things which was paper-based. And then from there, you can extrapolate those insights to a portfolio level. And what that means in real language is if you've got 2 billion of capital in construction, and I can save you 2% on the project execution because I use an app to take a picture of quality assurance versus writing a bit of paper, that's huge quantums of cash.
Yep.
And it's relatively recession proof. Construction is quite consistent.
Yeah, I think the way I would sum it up with, we're at that place with this paradigm shift taking place. Before you decide to automate that 1 million square foot building, you got to get it right sized because, how many people are going back to the office? How many people use malls? This whole COVID experiment shifted everything. So number one is you got to right size the portfolio. Then number two, you got to automate the heck out of it. It's got to be run efficiently, effectively, energy efficient. But most important, it needs to have experience part of that when you go back. And now we start talking metaverse and a whole new set of conversations. And on the construction tech, which there's one application, I hear there's a rumor that the Boston Dynamics robot Spot might be speaking at Realcomm and IBCon. I heard that rumor.
Yeah.
So we're going to actually have a robot registered. We're trying to figure out how we hang his badge.
Look forward to meeting him or her.
Yeah, I mean, we don't just talk innovation. We ourselves take risks. We believe if we're asking everybody to innovate, we got to do it as well and be prepared to fail, by the way. Okay, we're running over, but I got one more quick question. 30 seconds, each of you. You got an investor, you're on the elevator, you're coming down. He holds up a check for $1 billion and says, where do I put it? Start with Ivan.
Good question. I think it's around that automation piece that Stephen was saying. Automated decision-making insights. I think that's the play. Aggregating of data. I think that's the play.
Is there don't name it, but is there a company or a couple companies that you're pretty excited about right now?
Yeah, there are a number. I think we've seen a number of companies. I think also that intersection on how to leverage blockchain technology to also optimize and be more transparent in certain data sets, let's say, is something that we're looking in closely. Yeah,
and a lot of those companies are going to be at the conference. We've got all the enterprise, 30-year-old traditional powerhouses. We've got that middle, marketplace that's just the stabilizer, the 10, 15-year-old company. And then we got a slew of startups. And guess what? You need all of those to be part of the ecosystem. It's not just startups. It's just not enterprises. They all work together to keep this thing moving. Stephen, final thoughts. $1 billion. What do you do?
Not at the moment, not crypto, but I think,
or you should maybe.
Maybe you should, yeah, exactly.
Depends on your strategy, but I think we just gone through data sets actually, and we've shaped some of our metadata and data dictionaries. And for us, it's actually a key concept is space utilization and space repurposing. And if you look at what's happened in the US over the last couple of years, I think it was 18,000 apartments in 2019. They now think it's going to be 32,000 apartments in 2022. Has been repurposed from primarily office buildings. So if you can have a tech that can solve the floor plate, the planning, and transit, make these buildings a lot more flexible in a retrospective point of view, retrofit, that's going to do very, very well. I think the composition of cities is going to change significantly globally.
It's funny that you just reminded me about 25 years ago, I was doing a speech in Manhattan, full room, and I made the prediction 25 years ago that some days offices are going to get challenged because of laptop computers and the internet at the time. And the whole room laughed. And the guy who kind of put me on the spot, said, Jim, you don't know anything about an office building. I said, it can never be an apartment building. The elevator banks are different. The windows don't open. And I just looked at him as the crowd was laughing at me, not with me. And I said, they'll figure it out. And here we are, 2022, and it's happening. So guys, I can't tell you how happy I was to have you on the show today. And I want to say thank you for getting up in the middle of the night. Looking forward to seeing you and really taking these PropTech conversations to another level in a couple of weeks. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Safe travel.
Thanks for having us, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, two great guys, know their stuff, do their homework. Really important when you're throwing lots of money around. So let's bring on Howard, and he's going to give us the week news. Howard, how are you?
Hey, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, that conversation could have gone for a week.
Yeah, you're right. Those guys are great, and their perspective, I think. Well, we'll be hearing a lot from them at the conference, and I want to thank both Ivo and Steven. Really looking forward to their thought leadership in Orlando in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I want to get to the day where 1 + 1 = 2 again. That I think that would be healthy for the industry. I think guys like this are going to help us get there. So
I agree.
Let me get out of your way, and you can do the news.
I'm going to recap just a couple of stories from the week. So our lead story is from Mandy Wedden from Feroce Real Estate Advisors. It's on ESG and entitled "It Matters, Measure It." If it matters, measure it. So we typically measure investments by financial metrics like EBITDA and NOI, but now ESG performance is being applied to this broader way of looking at commercial real estate investors. And investors literally looking for risk-adjusted returns paired with positive social impact. And the pillars of ESG, of course, are environmental and focused on sustainable, fair, efficient use of resources; social, how we manage relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and communities; governance, transparency, accountability. And these we add to a fourth pillar, which we call resilience, ability to identify, address, mitigate, respond to risks and opportunities. So Mandy encourages real estate organizations to start now, have a plan. We need metrics, reporting tools like GRESB. Bottom line, ESG reporting is evolving and best to be forward thinking about it. So get started. Great article. Thank you, Mandy. I also want to shout out to this week's tech partner, Yardi. So I think we agree. We're all perplexed about the outlook for return to office. Folks like working from home. They are not shy about exploring other employment options. More than 47 million Americans voluntarily left their jobs last year. Just this last February, a Pew Research study found that 6 out of 10 workers say their jobs can mainly be done from home. So during the pandemic, landlords spent a ton of money on HVAC, touchless cleaning supplies, social distancing signs. Today, more about unconventional amenities like doggy daycares and beehives and grab-and-go cafes and golf simulators. The list of potential amenities is almost limitless: event centers, private offices, catering, kitchen spaces, open areas, in addition to the basics like Wi-Fi and good phone service. So one thing is for certain, tech and a lot of it's going to be foundational to providing and managing these next-gen amenities and services like Yardi's Cube. So great article. Thank you, Yardi. Next, GSA, General Services Administration, is demonstrating and validating some pretty cool next generation smart building technologies. So GSA is working with U.S. Department of Energy's Building Technologies Office, BTO. They're moving forward with pilots of 9 building technologies to help meet zero carbon goals. Here's a quick peek. There's an additive that increases heat transformation by Endo Technologies, bidirectional EV charging by Fermated Energy, AI plus AER building energy management systems by the Building People, CO2-based heat pump by Dalrada, energy management information and building automation system by Sidewalk Labs, EV charge management by Weave Grid, high efficiency dehumidification by Conservant, non-metallized window film by 3M, solar PV tracking by Rocking Solar. And this program is going to enable GSA to make next-gen building technology investments based on actual performance. So there's more to come on this. Finally, this one blows my mind. A metaverse real estate deal valued at $5 million. So this was reported in a press release by CryptoSlate. I can't attest to the accuracy or truth, but it was reported. According to the press release, TCG World announced a strategic partnership with Curzio Research, which has acquired 19 commercial real estate properties inside TCG World for $5 million. Curzio plans on building its headquarters in the Asia region of TCG World, adjacent Wall Street bets for investor meetings, events, seminars, conferences, and the like. So, and with that, I'm going to wrap it up. That's it for me today. Back to you, Jim.
Well, we laugh, but I'm not, I remember when Bill Gates said this internet thing is a passing fad. Okay. So I'm actually getting more clarity on the metaverse every day and the connection between the physical world. I mean, was it Accenture bought 60,000 headsets for its new employees? They're going to spend.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Training, maintenance, gaming, events, all make sense.
Well, and we're also going to play with some metaverse things at the conference. Just a little tip there as well.
But like any of the virtual stuff or any of the emerging technologies, I think there are clear use cases, and we have to be very, when we try to apply those to real estate, we have to be really sober.
Yes, we do.
How we apply those.
Well, and I also want to make mention of your Yardi discussion about amenities. Amenities are absolutely one of the things, but I would say that these other three things have to be taken into serious consideration if we want to get those buildings full again, being fully utilized, and making those urban areas vibrant again. In addition to great amenities and experiences, which I'll lump into that, new virtual, digital, metaversal type experiences, you need to consider indoor air quality, i.e. the pandemic, right? People got to know that air is clean. Number two, safety. All you got to do is read the headlines every single day, what's going on with crime. Those buildings have to be safe. And three, you can't ignore the commute anymore. You can't not ignore that hour each way on a train, in a car, whatever. And we've got to be smart, because these people are being stubborn, and not in a bad way. I mean, they've had 2 years of experience, and I think that we can't deny that. And these new experiences and these buildings we bring them back to, they got to be something different.
Yeah, I mean, we're competing for their time. We're asking them to be in the office. We better make it worth their while, and make it worth the company's while to make those investments. Yeah,
absolutely. So, hey, great job as usual, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
I'll have a great long.
And before we end the show, let's take a brief commercial break, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about next week's show.
Office platform by iOffice and Space IQ makes tough calls easier. Our software brings all your real estate data from many different systems into a single platform. You can identify occupancy rates and trends with intelligent space management software and sensor integrations. You can help tenants make the most of your space with technology that helps them find people and places fast. Turn tough real estate calls into opportunities with iOffice. Brought to you by iOffice and Space IQ.
All right. So, when you're talking about real estate technology, you can talk about an application, you can talk about a solution, you can give somebody a demo on a computer terminal, all good stuff. But the magic really happens when you see all those technologies come together and make a different, unique type of real estate, i.e. a building, right? A smart building, an intelligent building, a digital district. And so for about 10 years now, we have been doing something called the Smart Building Innovation Showcase. And what it does is it brings together some of the smartest buildings from around the world. Google's campus has been on there, Microsoft's campus, Burj Khalifa, Shanghai Tower. I mean, we've had some of the most intelligent digital next generation buildings in that showcase. And what we're going to do is we're going to go internal next week, no external guests. We're going to have myself, Howard, and Tina Danielson, who runs the showcase for us and has really become quite the expert on what's going on globally. And we're just going to talk about some of the projects and what people can expect when they're walking around that showcase. In many cases, we'll have the project manager, the person responsible for that, some of the technologies, but you'll be able to see it in a way that you can understand it in action in the building. So with that, I want to say have a great day, great weekend, be well, and we'll see you next Friday on Realcomm Live. Be well.